stakeholders and social media. And I guess you'll tell us more about how companies can use it the same way, free of charge. There are renters in Facebook, so they can use different means of social media. Ah, yes, the clicker.
Kalispera. So from Facebook novice to social media CEO. So I was a social media cynic. And so why is it this irony of me now heading up a social media company? Can I get a quick flavor of the people in the room? How many of you actively use social media in your business to get new business? So prospecting, developing relationships. Okay, so is it about maybe nearly half of the room there. How many of you might use it for other purposes, such as research or customer services? Okay, so that's probably about a quarter. Fantastic, thank you. So I don't need to explain the benefits in that sense. There's obviously good understanding around the room about that, but the next level of it, in the sense of game changers, generation we, how can we really take it to the next level? How can we make sure that we innovate and use it to distinguish ourselves in business? So I mentioned I was a cynic. So before startup, I was very much a city girl. I only had 2 employers. I worked for KPMG as my graduate job, and then I moved into Morgan Stanley, where I spent 13 years, working on new products, new markets, working on restructures. So a world away from the world of social media. And then I took the jump. So Henrik mentioned earlier, it's jumping off a cliff. Absolutely, that's how I felt as well. And that sense of, why would you do it? Why leave that safety and security? And of course, things have changed since then. But for many, they thought I was completely mad. Is it you're brave to start up, or are you mad to start up? What is the distinction between those things? I loved my time in the corporate world, but I knew it was time. And in that flavor of game changers, and that in what technology enables us to do now, what has changed? In the professional services world, my key resources, my key tools, hiring the very, very best people I could. You know, that's the key thing, hiring that talent, getting it through the front door. And then what do you do in professional services? What equipment, what tools? You're giving them technology. So in this day and age, that's key to any professional services business, getting the very best people, giving them the best tools, and it's technology. And one of the best things right now, and why the time is now, as Desiree was mentioning earlier, the time is now because with the cloud, with technology, you don't have to be a huge firm with a huge budget. The cloud enables us to get to the benefits, get to the great technology of the largest of firms and be able to compete. So for me, it had to be technology, but I didn't want to assume anything else. What do people need? We went out and asked. We had quite a significant market research phase to our business where we asked businesses, what do you want? What do you need? What's your biggest problem? If we could magic wand you what you wanted, what would it be? And of course, with these difficult times, everybody was very focused on new business. And some were quite brutal about it. In a way, we don't care about inefficiencies. People are scared for their jobs. We can make them work harder. Who cares about inefficiencies? We care about getting new business through the front door. How can we do that? And I mentioned earlier, I'm a cynic, so during this market research phase, I was playing with social media. It was just, it's the 2010s, I need to have some kind of understanding of how it fits in. And to put that into context, this is the image of when I joined the working world. So when I joined KPMG as a graduate, this is how the world looked. This is how technology looked. And when I started to play with social media and hear criticism about social media in the business world, it took me right back to that first job. Because 2 things happened to me when I first joined KPMG. One of the things was that I had to get to a point of being a trusted individual to be allowed to use email. I had to be an approved person to represent my company outside of the firm. So you might smile at that now, but how often is that said about social media? How often is it that senior individuals won't be using it because they don't think it's relevant? And that was the second thing. As I applied for my authority to get onto email, there was a senior partner that said to me, oh, I don't know why you'd want to do that. It's completely irrelevant. Email is completely irrelevant to how I talk with my clients and my contacts, and I don't see when I'll ever use it. Again, how often is that said about social media right now in the business world? So that was the context for me, and thinking about how is it not relevant? And as I started to think about those two analogies, I started to think about, but actually, nothing has changed. You know, fundamental to all business is this: business is about relationships. It's about winning and building that know, like, and trust, so that people care about you, so that they will buy from you, so that they will talk about your business on your behalf. So that's not changed. Over the years, things have changed in terms of how we speak. How do we build those relationships? So we went from stamps, right, letters, to fax, to phones. We did email in my working life. From email, we then moved on to devices. It was Blackberries, it was tablets, it was smartphones. So what's changed? Nothing's changed. It's just the mechanisms in which we've used. The platforms are what's changed, but ultimately, it's all about building relationships. The one thing about social media that does change business dynamics is the fact that it can put you at the heart of conversations. So one of the biggest fears about social media is it's public and real time. How do we handle it in a professional way? How do we deal with our fears about that? What governance issues do we have? How do we need to worry about that? But actually, that is the glass half empty perspective. The fact it's public, it's real time, means it's searchable. As opposed to that need to be a huge company sending out millions upon millions of bits of paper, having people on the phones. You don't need to do that. You can be talking very publicly about the thing that you care about, your expertise, and what happens is people can come and find you. They can find the conversations that are relevant. And so in terms of accelerating through the know, like, and trust, that's a very powerful thing that social media gives us that we haven't had before. So a snow ambush in the picture, but what was actually referred to was an accidental marketing ambush. Now, very early on in my startup life, there was a conference that I wanted to attend, and I was being a little cheeky about I wanted to pay nothing to attend, of course, I'm a startup. I knew about this conference because one of the keynote speakers I had tweeted with. And so I saw him on the agenda, I thought, perfect, this is my time to meet him in person. We've been tweeting, and we've never had a chance to meet. Immediately I said, great to see you on the agenda, let's catch up. It's a 2-day conference, you must be staying overnight. Tweet comes back, perfect, let's meet up that evening. So that happens on one side. On the other side, as I say, I'm cheekily going to the conference and saying, hey, can I come along? I'm a startup, and before I spend any money with you, of course I need to know if it's a good conference. So I tried it on. It didn't work. They were very rude and very snooty and said, no way, you're not paying us any money. The minimum level is this. And I even did challenge their business model. Hey, you know, if it's that much money, it was lots of thousands of pounds to entry level. If it's that much money, why would I pay you that next year if I haven't had any experience of your conference when I've got money? Nope, it's the way it works. If you want to come, you're going to have money. So fine, park that conversation. Now, in the meantime, we were saying, let's use a hashtag. So people, you know, if you're not using the GEW Greece hashtag, you should be. Because what happened was, people had seen, we had the keynote speaker and myself had lots of shared followers. People saw that we were meeting up, and they were like, hey, Linda, if you guys are meeting up, can we come too? And through the use of the hashtag, that conversation just kept on growing. And it kept on growing to the extent that our informal drinks ended up being much larger than the original conference. People were tweeting at me asking, you know, is there an entry fee? Is there criteria? How can I go? And so myself and this keynote speaker, we ended up being at the heart of this conversation. And this party just formed around us and grew and grew and grew. And what I have to say amused me a little as a startup was the man that was snooty and rude to me, he had to phone me back. He was made to call back by the rest of his team, and he even said, you are a Monday morning meeting agenda. I have been reprimanded for the way I've spoken to you. I need to ask you if you would send any of your attendees to our conference. Could you encourage them to come? And is there any way we can work with you in terms of some kind of sponsorship? Now, I'm not suggesting that you all go out and create a massive marketing ambush. To me, it was initially an accidental thing. But it illustrated to me the power of how those conversations can connect. What are the analogies for your business in terms of getting that reach out to your contacts that you're interested in? So to me, that was the build of the idea. And from that, that's where the startup began. And we moved in thinking, how will it work if we have the same challenges? If people understand that it's no different to email. If every member of the organization starts joining social media and using social media in the way that email is used, how will they cope? How will they manage it? And that became the birth of Cube Social. And of course, we have to be our own best case study. So we have used social media and our own platform and nothing else. That's been key to us. We have not spent money on marketing, on PR. It's been important that everything for us as an opportunity has come through social media. And these are some of the recognitions, some of the press, some of the awards that we have won. And another piece of advice I would share with you about social media is embrace the serendipity of it. I talked about it being real-time, public, searchable. My first interview with the BBC was a 45-minute radio interview. And that came about because a journalist was passing through the town that my startup is based in on a train, and she said, "My goodness, that looks like a really grim place." And all I did was reply saying, "Hey, actually, did you know that I'd left banking and I now live there and I'm doing a startup?" From that, there was an article written. From that, the BBC picked up the phone and asked me if I would talk to them. So embrace the serendipity. There's lots of opportunities there. So Generation We. What can I share with you to implement straight away into your working lives? So think about these analogies. My first tip, think about your virtual shop front. Each one of us has that now because of the SEO, Google. Someone meets you, they can find out a lot of information about you. And of course, social platforms are incredibly well optimized. So make sure your shop front is something appealing, that people would want to come through the front door. Make sure you have a good address. If you haven't claimed your URL as your own, make sure you do. LinkedIn's default is always to put lots of letters and numbers in there. So make sure you claim it. It takes seconds to change that. Have a good address. Make sure it's really easy for people to join the dots. I had an example, actually. There was a traditional print article, the Institute of Directors, very old school in England. So they wrote an article about our business. A potential investor, we're still self-funded, but a potential investor saw the article, Googled me, found me in LinkedIn, read my profile, saw I had a Twitter account, tweeted at me, "Would you like a coffee?" Make it easy for the people you want to talk to actually find you and want to talk to you. Make it incredibly easy for them to join the dots. And then in the way I've just explained with that scenario, think about how brilliant social media is for your research. Never, ever go into a conversation cold. It is so easy to get that information. So you join every conversation in a warm way. You have information about the people at the meeting. But of course, remember the flip side of that. If you can research people can research you. So make sure all your profiles are up to scratch. Make sure there's something that when someone, your ideal client, your ideal investor, whoever it is you want to talk to, make sure your profiles would encourage them to want to talk to you. And then don't delegate. So one of the things, usually, particularly in the large corporates, sorry, not the very largest, the mid-range firms, is we'll get the grad to do it, we'll get the youngster to do it. It's an extra thing that we'll add on to our business. They have spare time. I'm a senior person, I don't have time. And they delegate social media. Now, I've talked about LinkedIn being the virtual shop front. So Twitter, I would call the virtual cocktail party, and Facebook is the virtual house party. Different dress codes, different tone of voice, different communities. And you have to send the appropriate representative to each of those places. So if that grad, if the youngest person in the team is the person you would send to each of those events to represent your firm, that's great. If they're not, do not send them to the virtual equivalent, which reaches a much larger audience. And then finally, in terms of social media tips, I would say make sure you use the right platforms. When we first started our business, it was fascinating to me how many companies say, "Okay, yeah, I got that I had to do social, so we've created a Facebook account." Facebook's the third largest country. That's got to be key, right? We should have that. And of course, does that matter? If none of your contacts and clients would want to talk work to you there is absolutely no point being there. So for us, actually, as a B2B product, Twitter and LinkedIn have been far, far more important. It's the virtual cocktail party. It's the networking events. That's where we would want to be and where the people we want to speak to are. So speak where people want to listen to you. Find the right platforms. And in terms of the theme of Generation We, I wanted to leave with my key top tip for all entrepreneurial spirit, for anyone. Or it could be applying for a job, it could be applying for thinking about quitting to start up. One of the things that I have learned and have mentored a lot of people on is don't self-select out. It's so frustrating to me when I see it happen. It's looking at an application form or thinking about a new business startup or any opportunity, actually, where you sit and you read through the criteria that's required, you pick out everything that you cannot do, and you do not apply. Think about the people that read exactly the same criteria, who are perhaps less skilled, less able, less capable than you are. They pick through everything that they can do, and they apply. You've not given yourself the opportunity to compete with someone less capable, less able than yourself. Don't self-select out. And so in terms of the next generation, the Generation We, think about what we have available to us at low cost, at an ability for us to find this information. Social media, social analytics, so much data at our fingertips. That next generation of client relationship management, how we can use that to really fire up our businesses and compete with the very largest of organizations. I think there's a Q&A at the end of the day, but always happy to help at Cube Social, so just let us know. And all the very best with all your adventures that are coming up.
Thank you, Linda.